Hey everybody, I'm driving home and I wanted to do a follow-up to my video from yesterday because I have some time while I'm in the car. I'm sorry for the angle here. I know it's not great, but it's safer than me putting it up on the dashboard. Some of you have called me to task for my dangerous behavior, where I've been videoing myself while driving. So I think it's safer to just have the camera on my thigh, even if the view isn't all that great. But this isn't really about the view. It's about the words. It's about what you hear, man. So I appreciated everyone watching and commenting on my prior video, and I think I got a little bent out of shape about how I think some of the respondents seemed to misunderstand what I was saying, what the thesis was that I was defending, and this is a thesis that I'm going to be spending some time on, and it's something I'm going to be writing about. It's something I've written about a bit already, but it's something I'm going to be spending more time writing about, just because, as I said last time, it seems like something that. It seems to me something that just is just standing. It's just the veracity of it just pops for me right now. I just can't help but see it as something that really needs to be drawn attention to. And maybe I'm right and maybe I'm wrong. And I welcome thoughtful critiques. It's true also that I'm an amateur historian. I'm not a quote unquote scholar. I do have a master's degree, but not in history. So if you want to just dismiss me as somebody who doesn't know what he's talking about, I think that would be a mistake, not because I think I'm brilliant, but just because I think a lot of great insights have been unearthed by people who are non-experts, and that's a fact. That's just a truth. And so I would encourage an open mind, keeping an open mind, but that's something you're either going to have or you're not going to have, and if you choose not to have it, then peace be with you. So that's the preamble. Now, how did I feel that I was misunderstood by some of you in my video yesterday, which I titled "After 1990, Everything Went to Ruin," or something like that, something along those lines. Well, I think first of all, I picked a title that, you always try to pick titles that are evocative and that will, you hope, provoke enough interest to get people to tune in. But what I have learned is that sometimes if you pick a title that asks a question, then people are just going to answer the question, just going to hop into the comment section and answer the question without listening to the actual video or watching the actual video. And so that's why I tend to try to avoid asking questions. I think asking a question can be a very evocative a starting point, especially when it's not a question that has any easy answer to it. When it's something closer to a rhetorical question, where there's not just one answer, but there's several different ways of attacking it. Well, I didn't choose to title my video yesterday as a question, but I nevertheless titled it in a way that if you didn't watch the video, you would maybe mistake me for saying that everything was hunky-dory until 1990, and then in 1990 things went to hell. But that was not at all what I was saying, and I think maybe even some of you who watched the video thought that I was saying something close to that. I mean, I think what I want to make it clear that I do understand that the decline has been underway for a long, long time. I don't know what the date was of the decline. I don't know how to date it exactly. History has many contrived corridors, and so forth. You could date it to the French Revolution. You could date it to the end of World War II, when America became this world power, and the CIA and groups like them were given this particular power, and they infected these intelligence organizations infected all of these other institutions and corporations. You could date it from the I guess there were some people talking about 1913. I guess there was one comment who put 1913 when the Federal Reserve came into being, I think it was. You could date it from the end of from 1865. Especially if you're a Southern partisan, and I am to a degree. You can go back to the Protestant Reformation if you want to get more controversial. You can go take it all the way back to 1066, right? The split between the Eastern Church and the Western Church, when instead of just referring to the one church, universal, the church became those in the East who came to call themselves Orthodox, and those in the West who came to call themselves Catholic. Years and years before the Protestant Reformation, you could start the beginning point of the decline at various times, but I am well aware that the decline had started well before I was born. I was born in 1971. That's earlier than I'm guessing most of you were born. Not all of you, but most of you. But I'm aware that things weren't just hunky-dory in the 70s and 80s. So I think if you actually watched the video and came away thinking I was saying that things were good up until 1990, and then things got bad, then you fatally misunderstood what I was saying, and I don't think you should. I don't think you ought to have had that misunderstanding. But it's also possible that I could have emphasized that point more, because I think whenever you stake out a date and you say, here's the date where it all went wrong, you run the risk of people saying it was going wrong way before then. And agreed. But 1990 was the specific thing that I want to draw attention to with regard to 1990, and why I'm making that date so significant. Why I think that is the date to really look at, the year to really look at, is it is the year when political correctness was born, in the sense that it became this massive force culture-wide. One of you was talking about how political correctness, was something that was being seen in academia all through the 80s, and I'm sure that's true. But I tend to, my impression is that academia has almost always leaned left. So, given that political correctness came out of leftism, it's not as significant for my purposes to talk about what political correctness was on college campuses prior to 1990. Yes, it was I'm sure people were not getting tenure, or were getting denied getting hired because they didn't have the right ideology, or whatever. I'm sure that stuff was happening. That's been happening for a long time. I'm sure. I'm positive. It probably got worse. After the 60s and 70s. After the upheavals of the 60s, and the student protests and all those kinds of things, and how that brought this sort of militancy to the liberal arts, to liberal arts education. It brought this veneer of, or this not veneer, that's not the right word. It brought this element of militancy, which I think a lot of academics just decided to cave to. There were academics who fought against the student radicals and thought they were, the ones who were, not just the ones who were marching, who were pro civil rights or pro, ending the war in Vietnam, but the ones who were actually practicing much more coercive strategies. But yeah, academia, you're right, academia fell, a long time ago, I would say, to a large degree, and never, there's always been, it's never an all or nothing proposition, because there are still people in academia who aren't brainwashed. There are colleges and universities which, their whole bread and butter is, we are not leftists. We represent the old time liberal arts tradition. We're not politically correct. And the place I went to for graduate school, actually, the University of Dallas, was one of those places. One of the places that had that reputation, or not they didn't advertise themselves as conservative, but they advertised themselves as a place to avoid political correctness. So 1990, though, is significant because it was when liberalism became coercive. Liberalism, leftism, whatever you want to call it. When it was when there began to be penalties, and not just, I mean, this has been the case on college campuses for a while, I'm sure, but when it started to go beyond left-wing college campuses and expanded to broader aspects of the culture itself. And I remember this very, very well. This is burned into my brain as I wrote in response to one of the comments yesterday. I remember attending Emory University as a freshman in 1989, and I was a liberal. I was a very liberal young man, in just about every way. There were certain ways. I was always kind of contrarian on this issue or on that issue, and I always had a respect for faith, and a respect for the traditional faith and traditional teachings of faith. So I was never hostile to faith or to religion in the ways that I think a lot of leftists are. But in most ways, I was pretty liberal. I was pretty leftist in 1989 and 1990, my freshman year. Somewhere along the way, and in 1990, I remember starting to hear people talk about PC or political correctness. I remember people starting, I would just hear, we'd have conversations about it, about how, you can't say that, that's not PC. And I didn't know what they were talking about at first. And then I was like, oh, okay. So this is PC. So now I started to see how in certain cases, in certain circumstances, this particular, there got to be this push to make liberal ideology mandatory, and that if you did not embrace liberal ideology, or if you just had different ideas, or you wanted to question things, that you would get punished for it. So suddenly, and this was my sophomore year, when I began my sophomore year, 1990, 1991. I wasn't thinking anything about the Cold War. I wasn't thinking anything about historical circumstances or why this is going on now. Where did this come from? And nobody really was that I can remember. And as far as where did it come from, of course, it came from trends in the culture that did antecede 1990 by a while. As I said in my video yesterday, there had been feminism, there had been feminist groups which had made a lot of very much of a dent in the culture. Gay activism, ethnic activism, black activism. That was all out there. That was all part of. There was a liberal scene for sure. No argument. All through the 80s, all through the Reagan 80s, the liberal scene was kind of like it was what you embraced if you saw yourself as a nonconformist or a counterculturalist. You know, you were opposed to the Reagan 80s, and you embraced these figures. You know, like punk rock had, you know, punk rock was leftist, and you know, other like alternative niches of you know, independent thinkers or what have you. What, you know, you would, if you were, again, somebody who didn't want to conform, who didn't just think of yourself as just you know, some stupid jock or you know, or just some preppy or whatever, you would, you know, you would get into these liberal movies or this music which would have lyrics which would make fun of Reagan and Reagan conservatives and stuff like that. That was a scene all through the 80s. It was a hip sort of, it was hip to be liberal in the 80s. But it was a very different thing in a couple of ways. Number one, there was a sense of humor about it. You know, listen to the Dead Kennedys, you know, in the 80s. I mean, I think a lot of these punk groups, if they're still around now, they're probably all useless now. They're all just brainwashed now. Or maybe I'm being too categorical, but it's just my impression. But in the 80s, they had this kind of irreverent humor that would be seen as offensive today. You know, they would make jokes about things that you're not supposed to joke about. You know, but still be leftist. You know, gosh, was a band that it's the band that I'm thinking of. Oh, the Dead Milkmen. If you want to check out like a funny group that were, you know, leftist or left-oriented, but still very irreverent, very politically incorrect, and reveled in being that way. The Dead Milkmen would be an excellent example of that. And this sort of stuff was going on in the 80s. You could be a liberal and still, and there wasn't this sort of coercion behind it. There wasn't most of the time. Now, I know on college campuses, like one of you said, and I'm sure it's probably true, that if you didn't feel the right way or say the right things, then you know then you would be punished for it. But in the wider culture, that wasn't the case. All right, and I've got I've got some examples that I want to give from the wider, broader, popular culture in the 80s. Comedians, very famous, very popular comedians, like Eddie Murphy and Sam Kinison. These guys both became hugely successful comedians in the 80s, especially Eddie Murphy. But Sam Kinison also had a pretty big following, and so much of their bread and butter was being homophobic and being sexist. It was a huge part of their routine to make fun of gays and to disparage women. Go back and watch Eddie Murphy's concert movie Raw. You want to talk about being red pill? I mean, he talks about, in 1987, he talks about things that, you know, men's rights groups and MGTOWs and what have you, the red pill type of men are talking about now, or have been talking about for the last few years. But it's all out there. It's all there, and you know, he talks about going to San Francisco and being put on 24-hour homo watch because the gays who in San Francisco are mad at him because he made gay jokes and things like that. Sam Kinison making jokes about AIDS and and about how a woman changes after you marry her, and all this kind of stuff, very raw, very unfiltered. And these guys were huge, and people loved them. And yes, some people got offended. Feminist groups got offended. Gay groups got offended. But it didn't hurt their careers. It didn't make. There was no push to cancel them and others like them. I guess another comedian I would include would be Andrew Dice Clay. Now, with him, it gets a little dicey. No pun intended. A little more dicey in that I think he was doing his thing right around the early 90s when political correctness was starting to kick in. So he actually did face much more of a backlash. He was a very crude comedian, made jokes about gays, made jokes about women. And this isn't me touting any of these guys as brilliant comedians. I'm not, like, the quality of their craft is not the issue here. I do think they all had their moments, and I think that there's some of them their material is funny, and some of them their material is less funny. But the point is how the wider culture responded to them. Eddie Murphy completely got away with it, even though people were mad at him. There were some critics who responded to the movie Raw by saying this, by decrying it for being sexist. But it didn't hurt his success at all. And some people were mad at Sam Kinison, same reason. That probably applies to plenty of other comedians and people in the wider culture who were saying lots of things that you would not be able to say today without getting canceled. But it was not a problem before 1990. Now, Andrew Dice Clay was he became successful, I think in the very early 90s, and he was asked to host Saturday Night Live, and maybe it was 91, 92, somewhere around there. The night that he was asked to host, or the occasion where he was asked to host Saturday Night Live, Sinead O'Connor dropped out in protest because she didn't like him, and Nora Dunn, one of the SNL cast members, also said, "I'm not. This guy's a pig. I'm not gonna do a show if he's hosting it." But he still went on to host, and it got huge ratings. It's just because there were a ton of people out there who loved Andrew Dice Clay. So again, all this stuff, you see more pushback with Andrew Dice Clay because he was that's when we were starting to move into the PC cancel culture era. It wasn't being called cancel culture yet, but it was basically the same thing. But 1990 was the time when there suddenly got to be this coercion, where it wasn't just the feminists are going to bitch about this, or the gay activists aren't going to like this guy or that guy, this speaker, this comedian, this what today we would call influencer. Back then, there was or very little pushback, except with Andrew Dice Clay, who again did his thing right at the beginning of the politically correct era. So 1990 was not the beginning of terrible ideas being pushed on the culture. It was not the beginning of terrible ideas being believed and bought into on a mass level, in a way that undermined the overall quality of the culture. It's not like everything was good up to 1990. But I think what I'm trying to point out here with these anecdotal examples is how things changed. And again, you go back and I invite you to watch Eddie Murphy Raw. I'm not getting any sponsorship money from him. I just if you can watch it for free, that's great. But just watch it. See some of the stuff that he has to say. Or just type in Sam Kinison and see some of the stuff that he's saying. And they were not alone. It wasn't like these guys stood out. It's just they were maybe the most successful of the bunch. But returning to my own anecdotal reminiscences, when I went to school in my sophomore year, it was when I suddenly became aware that people were being told to shut the hell up if they weren't feminists, if they weren't properly feminist. Or if they were homophobic, considered to be homophobic, or whatever, and it was when people were wearing the pink triangles on their backpacks. There's the Weezer song "Pink Triangle" from their second album. Can't remember the name of it right now. But that was sort of the thing. Silence equals death. That was like the AIDS activist thing. Those were all trendy things to carry around, put on your backpacks, like sew to your backpacks. Whether or not you were gay, you could be straight but not narrow. But anyway, in 1991, in that year, my sophomore year, I was beginning to notice political correctness, and it was irking me. And again, I was in my freshman year, I really had no problem with anything about liberalism, except that I differed on certain issues. Here and there, I was contrarian. I took a different stance on particular issues, mostly related to sexual morality. I wasn't exactly pro-life yet, but I was more sympathetic to the pro-life point of view, even if I thought most pro-life people were annoying fundamentalists. I was open to it kind of made more sense to me, frankly, than the so-called pro-choice perspective. But that was just me, and I wasn't, but mostly I was liberal, and didn't really have a problem with liberalism in the broader culture as I saw it. But in 1990, 1991, when I started to see that suddenly people were getting punished, people were getting called out and held up for ridicule or contempt, in a way that sort of resembled Stalinism or Maoism. It was Maoism light, because nobody was getting actually killed or imprisoned at that time for holding the wrong opinions, but you began to see coercion applied, and I called it in the last video. I said that liberalism began to be coercive. Now, there's always been a sanctimony to liberalism, because, or danger of being sanctimonious when you're a liberal, because it's been my experience, having been a liberal in my youth, it's been my experience that when you're a liberal, you tend to just think you're smarter and you're more compassionate, and you're just you tend to see yourself as belonging to an exalted group, whereas the people who aren't with you, the conservatives, or the people who don't join you on your on your liberal crusades for this, that, or the other thing, are you kind of look down on those people as being beneath you. So sanctimony existed prior to 1990 amongst people on the left, and I think I was guilty of it myself from time to time. I don't say that proudly. On the other hand, I was a stupid teenager, so I at least had that excuse. But when there got to be this element of coercion, then I started to think there's something really wrong with this. And I think in 1991 I still thought of myself as a liberal, but I thought, I'm really not. This political correctness it just really isn't. I'm not with political correctness at all. I don't like it. I want to distance myself from it. And I think I hoped at the time that there'd be more of a groundswell amongst liberals against political correctness, because political correctness really was illiberal in the broader sense of the word, in the historical sense of liberal, and the broader meaning of the word liberal, as in liberal arts, and so forth. That what sometimes is called classical liberalism today. Classical liberalism was about being open to things and not being against coercion and challenging orthodoxies, but also just having a truly open mind, which didn't mean you don't have any convictions at all. It just means you don't react personally or vitriolically when someone questions your ideas. You engage that person in debate and find out, test your ideas, find out where they're strong and where maybe they could use some refinement. That was supposedly what it meant to be a liberal in the classical sense of the word. But I could see that there was that with PC there was none of that. I saw that at age 19, age 20. In the summer of 1991, when I was 20 years old, I ended up doing this internship on an American Indian reservation in South Dakota, a place called Rosebud, and the Rosebud Reservation. It's not as well known as Pine Ridge, but anyway, I don't need to get into too much detail about it. It's the reservation for the Lakota or the Sioux Indians, and the Lakota or Sioux Indians were the tribe that was featured in the movie Dances with Wolves, which I believe is one of the, I think I talked about in a video from a couple weeks ago. I think when I was talking about some of the earliest woke movies, that might have been the very earliest one, or at least one of the earliest. That came out in late 1990, and it was very anti-white. To say it was anti-white would be an understatement. It was anti-white in a way that I don't think any major movie had been anti-white prior to that time. So it was interesting, though, that I found myself. So I didn't, and when I saw the movie, I kind of didn't like how it was. I mean, at the time I was still a liberal, but I was sort of like, is every white man except Kevin Costner bad? And Kevin Costner only becomes good when he ceases to be, to go, when he goes native, when he becomes one of the Lakota, the noble savages, and opposes his own people, his own kind. That's the only time where he truly becomes heroic. I had some problems with that movie, but that movie was very successful. It did very well. It was a blockbuster movie, and I think it was the first time a movie of that stature, of that that pedigree, with a kind of budget that it had, with a big name star like Kevin Costner in it, where it actually succeeded, and while at the same time pushing this anti-white doctrine. Of course, there had been movies that were sympathetic to the American Indians, and prior to that, there had been liberal movies. Prior to that, there had been movies calling out, white racism. Prior to that, but nothing, and that's what I know some of you have said. Some of you have responded to me by saying that. I'm aware of that. I think Hollywood has always been fairly liberal, even if it's always been completely hypocritical, right? Like we we believe all women, but we rape women, or we want we want a better future for our children, but we traffic children commonly and sexually exploit them, and I mean, Hollywood is a filthy place, and its values, it has liberal values, but it doesn't live up to them in any way, in any sense. So yeah. But I think that this show, the Dances with Wolves, showed this turning of the tide, where a PC movie, a politically correct movie, could really flex, to use a modern term, could really flex on everybody. Like whoever the makers were of that movie, the producers were of that movie, they could say, we just made this totally anti-white movie, and it did really well, and tons of white people went to see it and loved it, and just thought it was great, and were completely oblivious to it being anti-white, or maybe they just thought, white people suck, except Kevin Costner, whatever character he played, whatever the name was of the character he played, who joined the Lakota Indians and fought against the white man. So I was on the I was in South Dakota at this remote spot on this Indian reservation, and I remember feeling at the time, like, if you see the reality of what an Indian reservation looks like, and some of the unsavory characters who you find there, this is not denying that the American Indians have their legitimate grievances. It's not denying that at all, but just seeing the difference between the Dances with Wolves romanticization of the red man and the reality of this this reservation. I remember being among there were a lot of white people who like these, I don't know, hippie types who would come out to do sweat lodges and take part in things like learn from Indian culture about spirituality and things like that. And I remember just getting into an argument with these people, and just feeling like they were being ridiculous. It was a funny state. It was a weird state to be in. Not South Dakota, but not the state of South Dakota. But it was weird to be out there. The idea of me doing this was sort of this do-gooder notion of I'm going to help underprivileged people, and I was out there arguing with these white liberal types who were embracing the anti-white, the white man is just about materialism, and we need to learn from our American Indian betters because they're so much more connected to spirituality and blah blah blah. I remember just getting really frustrated with these people. It was an interesting position to be in. Side note, this might or might not be, and I'm almost 50 minutes into this video, so I'm going to wrap this up soon, but I actually found myself at there was some big powwow, and I was there with a few other people, and Senator Tom Daschle was there. Now, I don't know if that name means anything to anybody now, but he came to be a very prominent liberal Democrat He was somebody who was like during the Clinton impeachment hearings was saying Republicans blah, and then in the Bush years was saying boo Bush, and like he was even though he was from remote and not very populated state like South Dakota, he had, I think he maybe was the House Speaker, I don't know. In any case, he had this prominent role, but I was actually there, like in a small room with him, and I had no idea who he was yet. This was 1991, but that's if you don't know who Tom Daschle is, then that probably means nothing to you, but just an interesting thing that happened to me while I was out there. So my experience in South Dakota was just, it helped, it was a weird summer. It didn't go as I had thought it would go. It was a very depressing area, and I don't know. I thought that it would be a certain kind of experience for me, but it definitely wasn't. And I remember after I left to go home, thinking to myself, being more anti-PC than ever I was prior to that time, because there was so much bullshit about, the white man's so terrible. The white man has no real spirituality. The white man is a spiritual void. And I just didn't buy that, and I didn't think that was. I thought there was something just. I didn't. The term virtue signal did not exist yet, but all these like hippie types, these white, these scruffy white folks who were out there going to sweat lodges and and like on this spiritual quest amongst the red man, because they've been born white, and that was such a terrible thing, and they just hated their own heritage and identity. I remember just thinking, these people are pathetic, and that they were like striking this righteous pose. And I didn't have the term virtue signaling yet, but that was definitely my impression of who they were or what they were doing. I might have been a little too harsh on some of them, possibly, but it was my impression of them, of a lot of them, generally speaking. And I don't think it was off the mark, even though I was a hot-headed 20-year-old. But my point of view of things had taken quite a turn since I became aware of political correctness. All right, I'm going to end this video here. So hopefully this clarifies some of the things in my prior video. And sorry this has been long. God bless you if you stayed to the end. That's it.